I'm staring at the hospital ceiling under fluorescent lights that buzz like wasps trapped in glass, and my daughter is holding her phone up, recording my husband as he tells the nurse I'm difficult, that I refuse medication, that I make up stories for attention. Her hand is shaking. I can see her face changing in real time, like watching ice crack across a frozen lake. This is the moment everything breaks open. But let me take you back to where it started, because you need to understand how a woman ends up in a hospital bed, watching her own child discover she's been lied to for years. 3 months ago, I was lying awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above my bed in this subsidized housing with long hallways and fluorescent lights. I'm 59 years old, and I was wearing my rust-colored cardigan with wooden buttons because the heat never works right in these older buildings. It was winter in Cleveland, Ohio, the kind of cold that keeps you inside, where the windows fog up from the warmth and the world outside disappears into white. I was trying to remember the last time my daughter called me just to talk. Not to ask a quick question or confirm a detail, but really talk, the way we used to. The silence in my apartment was heavier than the blankets pulled up to my chin. My plastic pill organizer with the days of the week sat on the nightstand. Wednesday. I'd made it to Wednesday. The apartment smelled like the lavender candle I'd burned earlier, trying to make the space feel less institutional, less like a waiting room for the end of something. The radiator clanked and hissed in the corner, a rhythm I'd grown used to, but never comfortable with. Through the thin walls, I could hear Mr. Chen's television playing some late-night talk show, the muffled laughter a reminder that somewhere, people were still finding joy in ordinary moments. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed like that. Really laughed, the kind that comes from your belly and leaves you breathless. My laughter had become small, careful, apologetic. The kind of laugh you make when you're not sure you're allowed to find something funny. I lived in a mixed-income area with older homes near downtown, the kind of neighborhood where people knew each other's business, but also knew when to mind their own. Mrs. Patterson in 4C always smiled at me in the hallway. Mr. Chen on the first floor saved newspapers for me because he knew I liked the crosswords. These were my people now, strangers who showed me more kindness than my own children. The realization made my chest hurt. Tomorrow, I was supposed to go play dominoes with friends from church, but I'd already decided to cancel. Again. I didn't know how to face them anymore. Didn't know how to sit at a table and pretend everything was fine when my family had evaporated like morning frost. The church ladies had stopped asking why I kept canceling. At first, they'd call. Sister Martha would leave voicemails saying they missed me, that the game wasn't the same without me, that they were worried. But after the 5th cancellation, the 6th, the 10th, the calls became less frequent. Then they stopped altogether. I'd see the concern in their eyes when I did make it to Sunday service, which was becoming rarer. They'd touch my arm gently and say they were praying for me, and I'd nod and smile and feel the shame burning in my throat. They were praying for me because they could see I was disappearing. Everyone could see it except the people who were supposed to love me most. Every morning, I still said the prayer before my feet touched the floor. Bless my family, keep them safe, bring them back to me. But the words were starting to feel like coins thrown down a well, disappearing into darkness with no echo. I didn't know if they were ever coming back. I didn't know if I deserved them back. My husband had destroyed me with something so simple it felt like a magic trick. He told our children I was stealing from him, that I was hiding money in accounts they couldn't see, that I was cruel to his mother who lived with us, that I was losing my mind, forgetting conversations, making accusations that never happened. And his mother, the woman I'd cared for, who I'd welcomed into our home, who I'd fed and bathed and loved like my own, she backed every single word. She sat at our kitchen table and nodded while he painted me as a monster. I can still see her face, the way she looked at me with something like pity mixed with contempt. My mother-in-law, who I'd sacrificed so much for, became my executioner. And my kids believed them, both of them. My son stopped returning my calls. My daughter's texts became shorter, colder, until they stopped altogether. I was being erased from my own family story, and I didn't know how to rewrite the narrative when no one would listen to my version. There was one specific moment I replay over and over, trying to understand when it all went so wrong. It was Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. I'd spent 3 days preparing. Turkey basted every hour, the way my mother taught me. Sweet potato casserole with the pecan topping my daughter loved since she was 6. Green bean casserole made from scratch, not the canned stuff. Homemade rolls that filled the house with the smell of yeast and butter. Apple pie and pumpkin pie cooling on the counter. I'd set the table with the good china, the set my grandmother left me, the one I only brought out for special occasions. I'd even bought fresh flowers for the centerpiece, yellow chrysanthemums, because they reminded me of sunshine. My son arrived first with his girlfriend. He hugged me, but it was different, stiff. The kind of hug you give someone you're obligated to touch but don't want to. His girlfriend didn't make eye contact. They went straight to the living room, where my husband and his mother were watching football. I heard them laughing together, easy and comfortable, while I stood in the kitchen stirring gravy and feeling like a stranger in my own home. My daughter came next, and she brought the kids. They ran to hug me, and that felt real. Children haven't learned to fake affection yet. But my daughter's smile didn't reach her eyes. She kept looking past me, toward the living room, like she was checking to make sure someone saw her being polite to me. Dinner was excruciating. I'd placed myself at one end of the table, my husband at the other, the way we always had. But the conversation flowed around me like I was a rock in a stream, something to navigate around rather than engage with. My husband told a story about work, and everyone laughed. His mother complimented my daughter's new haircut, and they talked about salons. My son discussed a promotion he was up for, and my husband gave him advice. I tried to join in. I asked my son about the promotion, what it would mean if he was excited. He gave me a one-word answer, fine, then turned back to his father and continued the conversation as if I hadn't spoken. I felt myself shrinking in my chair. My voice got quieter. I stopped trying to contribute, just passed dishes when asked and refilled glasses and cleared plates. I'd become the help at my own Thanksgiving table. When I brought out the pies, my daughter took a small piece of pumpkin and said she was watching her weight. My son said he was too full. His girlfriend was gluten-free, she informed me, eyeing the crust like it might attack her. My husband took a slice of apple and ate it while scrolling through his phone. Only his mother ate with enthusiasm and between bites. She told my daughter a story about how I'd forgotten to buy milk last week, and she'd had to drink her coffee black, and wasn't it sad how I was getting so forgetful these days? I'd never forgotten milk. We'd had a gallon in the refrigerator. I'd bought it 3 days before. But when I opened my mouth to say so, my husband looked at me with this expression. Not quite pity, not quite contempt. Something in between. And he said, "Mom, it's okay to admit when you forget things. We all get older. It's normal." And my daughter nodded. My son looked uncomfortable, but didn't disagree. And I sat there with my mouth open, the truth dying in my throat, because what was the point? They'd already decided what was real. The milk I'd bought didn't matter. The gallon still sitting in the refrigerator didn't matter. Their version of reality had already solidified, and I was just a confused old woman who couldn't remember her own actions. That night, after everyone left, I threw away 3 pies worth of uneaten dessert. I washed the good china by hand, carefully, the way you do when something is precious and irreplaceable, and I cried into the sink full of soapy water, watching my tears disappear into the suds. My husband was in the living room, watching television. His mother had gone to her room, and I was alone with a kitchen full of food no one wanted and the growing certainty that I was losing a war I didn't know I was fighting. You're probably screaming at your screen right now, asking why I stayed. Why I didn't fight back harder, faster, louder. Let me tell you something about belief systems. I was raised to understand that forgiveness means family must always be forgiven. Blood doesn't turn its back. Marriage is sacred. You don't abandon ship when waters get rough. You pray, you forgive, you keep trying. So when he started the whispers, when I noticed my son pulling away at family dinners, when my daughter started looking at me with suspicion in her eyes, like I was a stranger wearing her mother's face, I thought if I just loved harder, if I just proved myself more thoroughly, they would see the truth. They would remember who I really was. I made Sunday dinners with pot roast cooking all day, filling the apartment with the smell of home, hoping it would bring them back. I called and texted and sent cards for every birthday, every holiday, every random Tuesday. I begged for chances to explain, to defend myself, to present my side. But he was always there first, always planting seeds. He'd mention casually to our son that I'd forgotten to pay a bill, making it sound like early dementia. He'd tell our daughter I'd said cruel things about her parenting, things I never said, would never say. He'd show them bank statements with withdrawals I supposedly made, money I never touched. And when I tried to correct the record, my desperation made me look exactly like the unstable woman he claimed I was. It was masterful, really. Diabolical. I remember calling my daughter one afternoon, maybe 6 months before the hospital. She answered, which was becoming rare. I could hear my grandchildren in the background, laughing, playing. Normal sounds of a normal life. I asked if I could come visit, maybe take the kids to the park. There was a long pause. Then she said, "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea right now." Her voice was careful, rehearsed. I asked why. Another pause. She said, "Dad told me what you said about me, about how I'm raising the kids, and I'm not ready to talk about that yet. I need space." I felt like I'd been punched. I asked her what I supposedly said. She wouldn't tell me, said she didn't want to get into it, didn't want to rehash the hurt. I tried to explain I'd never said anything negative about her parenting, that I was proud of her, that she was an amazing mother. But I could hear it in her voice. She'd already decided I was lying. The conversation ended with her saying she had to go, the kids needed something, maybe we could talk later. We didn't talk later. Weeks went by, then months. And I was left holding my phone, staring at her contact photo, a picture of us from 5 years ago at her daughter's baptism. We were smiling, arms around each other, happy. I didn't recognize those women anymore. What I sacrificed was everything. I gave up relationships, became isolated from friends and other family. I stopped going to church events because I couldn't bear the questions in people's eyes. Sister Martha would ask about the kids, and I'd have to smile and lie, say they were busy, when the truth was they wouldn't speak to me. I stopped calling my own sister because even she started to doubt me. She'd say things like, "Well, maybe you did forget that conversation. Maybe you're under stress and misremembering." The implication was clear. Even my sister thought I was losing it. So I withdrew from the dominoes games, from the potlucks, from every connection I had outside these walls, because the shame of not being believed by my own children consumed me like a slow fire. My sister and I used to talk 3 times a week. We'd been close our whole lives, shared everything. She knew my marriage had struggles, had listened to me vent about my husband's coldness, his mother's demands. But then he started calling her too. I didn't know about it at first. He'd call her and say he was worried about me. Say I was acting strange, forgetting things, getting confused. Say he thought maybe it was early onset dementia or a mental health crisis. Say he was trying to help me, but I wouldn't accept help. He poisoned that relationship so slowly, so carefully, that by the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. The last real conversation I had with my sister ended with her suggesting I see a doctor. Get some tests done, make sure everything is okay upstairs. She tapped her temple when she said it, like I might not understand what upstairs meant. Like I was a child who needed visual cues. I told her I was fine, that my husband was lying. She got this look on her face, sad, concerned, like she was watching me unravel and didn't know how to help. She said, "Honey, I've talked to him. He's worried sick about you. He loves you. He's trying to help. Maybe you should let him help." And I realized she believed him more than she believed me. Her own sister, the person she'd known for 57 years. She believed a man she'd only known through my marriage more than she believed me. I stopped calling after that. She'd reach out occasionally, leave voicemails asking how I was, saying she loved me, saying she was there if I needed her. But her help came with conditions. It came with the assumption that I was the problem, that I needed fixing. that if I just admit something was wrong with me, everything would get better. I couldn't accept help built on a foundation of lies. So I let that relationship fade too. Another loss. Another piece of myself erased. I gave up my dignity trying to prove I wasn't what they said I was. I spent money I didn't have on gifts they wouldn't accept. I apologized for things I never did. I shrank myself smaller and smaller, hoping that would make room for their love to return. I stopped having opinions. I stopped defending myself. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the edges of a family that no longer wanted me. And the worst part? I started to believe maybe they were right. Maybe I was forgetting things. Maybe I was the problem. That's what gaslighting does. It makes you doubt your own memory, your own reality, until you don't trust anything about yourself anymore. I started writing things down, keeping a journal of conversations, of events, of what was said and when. I thought if I could document everything, I'd be able to prove my version was real. I'd have evidence. But then I'd read back through my entries and wonder if I'd remembered correctly. Had he really said that? Or had I misunderstood? Had that conversation really happened that way? Or had I twisted it in my mind? The journal became another tool of self-doubt instead of clarity. I'd write that his mother told my daughter I'd yelled at her, and then I'd question whether maybe I had raised my voice and didn't remember. Maybe I was getting angry and losing track. Maybe I was becoming the person they said I was. The apartment felt like a prison cell those last few months. The walls were beige, institutional. The kind of color that means nothing and everything at once. My rust-colored cardigan became like armor, something I wrapped around myself for comfort when there was no one left to provide it. I'd sit by the fogged-up windows in winter and watch the street below, see families walking together, laughing, connected. I'd wonder what I'd done to deserve this isolation. I'd replay every interaction with my children, searching for the moment I'd failed them so completely they'd chosen their father's lies over their mother's truth. I watched a young mother with 2 small children one morning. They were building a snowman in the little park across the street. The kids were bundled in bright winter coats, red and blue, and they were laughing as they rolled the snowballs bigger and bigger. The mother was laughing too, helping them, taking pictures with her phone. It was such a simple moment, such an ordinary moment. And I sat at my window crying because I used to be that mother. I used to build snowmen with my kids. I used to hear their laughter and feel it fill something in my chest that felt empty now. I used to be someone's person, someone's first call, someone's safe place. Now, I was just a woman at a window, watching other people live the life I'd lost. Maybe you're still wondering why I didn't fight harder. Here's what you need to understand. When you're taught your whole life that forgiveness is the highest virtue, that family loyalty is non-negotiable, that walking away is failure, you'll accept almost anything to avoid being the one who breaks the chain. I'd watch my plastic pill organizer with the days of the week and think, just get through today. Tomorrow might be different. Tomorrow they might call. Tomorrow the truth might surface. I lived in a perpetual state of tomorrow, never accepting that today was my reality. The loneliest moments were the ones that should have been filled with family. Thanksgiving, I cooked a full meal for no one. Christmas, I wrapped presents they wouldn't open. Easter, I sat in church alone and listened to sermons about resurrection while feeling buried alive. My hobby of playing dominoes with friends from church became a memory, something I used to do, back when I was someone who deserved community. I kept canceling, kept making excuses, until eventually people stopped inviting me. Isolation is a spiral. The more alone you are, the more alone you become. Christmas was particularly brutal. I'd bought gifts for everyone. Thoughtful gifts. For my son, a book about the industry he worked in that had gotten great reviews. For his girlfriend, a scarf in the exact shade of blue she'd mentioned liking. For my daughter, a framed photo of us from her wedding day, professionally restored. For the grandchildren, toys I knew they wanted because I'd been paying attention during our video calls before those stopped. I wrapped everything carefully with real ribbon and bows, not the stick-on kind. I wrote cards, trying to find the right words to express love without seeming desperate. I asked my husband if we could deliver them together. He said he'd drop them off. I wanted to go with him, to at least see my grandchildren's faces, to maybe stay for coffee. He said that wasn't a good idea. He went alone. When he came back, he didn't say much, just that he'd given them the presents. I asked if they liked them. He shrugged, said they were busy, didn't have much time to chat. I found out later from Mrs. Patterson, who heard it from her daughter who knew my daughter, that they'd opened the presents after my husband left, that my daughter had cried, that she'd told someone the gifts made her feel guilty and confused. Because how could someone who supposedly said such terrible things about her also give such thoughtful presents? I'd managed to hurt her, even with my love, even with my care. Everything I did became evidence against me. But let me tell you what I didn't know then, what I couldn't see because I was too deep in the fog. My husband wasn't just lying to my children. He was orchestrating a systematic campaign to make me disappear. Every family gathering I wasn't invited to, he'd tell a story about my behavior that justified my absence. Every missed phone call from my kids, he'd already poisoned the conversation before they even thought about reaching out. He controlled the narrative so completely that I became a character in a story I didn't recognize. And he was the author writing my villain origin story. His mother was his most powerful weapon. She'd lived with us for 7 years, and I'd cared for her like she was my own mother. I'd helped her bathe when her arthritis got bad. I'd organized her medications. I'd driven her to appointments. I'd sat with her through her grief when her sister died. And in return, she sat at our table and confirmed every lie her son told. When he said I was stealing, she nodded and said she'd noticed money missing too. When he said I was cruel, she'd add details about my supposed outbursts. She'd look at my children with sad eyes and say things like, "I hate to say this, but your father is right. Your mother has changed." I remember the first time she lived with us. She'd fallen and broken her hip, needed surgery, needed months of recovery. She had nowhere else to go, no other family willing to take her in. I didn't hesitate. I said of course she could stay with us. I converted our spare room, the one we'd been using for storage, into a bedroom for her. I bought new sheets, a comfortable chair, a small television. I made it welcoming. I wanted her to feel like this was her home too, not just a place she was stuck. Those first few months were actually nice. We'd have coffee together in the mornings before my husband left for work. She'd tell me stories about when he was young, funny stories that made me understand him better. We'd watch cooking shows in the afternoon and try new recipes. She taught me how she made her famous lasagna, the one my husband loved. We'd work on crossword puzzles together. She'd help me fold laundry, even though I told her she didn't have to, she was recovering. She'd insist, say she needed to feel useful. I thought we were building something. I thought we were becoming family in a deeper way. I don't know when it changed, or maybe it was always an act, and I was too naive to see it. But somewhere along the way, she stopped being my ally and became his accomplice. Maybe he promised her things. Maybe he told her that I wanted her gone, which wasn't true, but she believed him instead of asking me. Maybe she just loved her son more than she cared about truth. Maybe blood really is thicker than anything else, including decency. The worst part was how good she was at it. She'd say things in front of my children that sounded concerned, but were actually accusations. She'd tell my daughter, "I'm worried about your mother. She's been so tired lately." Forgetting things, getting confused, said as if she cared, as if she was worried, but the implication was clear. Something's wrong with her. She'd tell my son, "Your mother got upset with me yesterday over nothing. I think the stress is getting to her. She needs help, but she won't admit it. Planting seeds, making me look unstable, making them doubt me before I even knew I was being doubted." The betrayal from her cut deeper than anything my husband did. I'd expected loyalty from my children because they were young. They didn't know better. They believed their father. But she was old enough to know what she was doing. She chose to destroy me. She chose to align with her son against the woman who'd cared for her. And I'll never understand why. Was it always there? This resentment? Or did he offer her something I couldn't see? Security, maybe. The promise that he'd care for her if she helped eliminate me from the picture. I'll never know. And that might be the part that haunts me most. Then everything changed. Medical crisis, health forcing truth into the open. I collapsed in the hallway of this building, right outside my door. A stroke, the doctors said. Small, they called it. But it felt like the world ending. Like my body finally gave up under the weight of everything I'd been carrying. I spent 5 days in the hospital. My husband didn't call our children. He told the hospital staff he was my only contact, my only family. He sat in the corner of my room on his phone, barely looking at me. His mother sat in the other chair, complaining about how inconvenient this was, how she had things to do, how I always had to make everything about me. The stroke happened on a Tuesday morning. I'd been trying to carry groceries from the car to my apartment, just 2 bags, nothing heavy. But I felt this sudden dizziness, like the hallway was tilting. I dropped the bags. I heard the eggs break, heard the jar of tomato sauce shatter. I tried to reach for the wall to steady myself, but my left arm wouldn't work right. It felt heavy, disconnected. I tried to call for help, but my words came out wrong, slurred, like my mouth wasn't part of my body anymore. The last thing I remember clearly is Mrs. Patterson's face appearing above me, her hand on my shoulder, her voice saying, "Stay with me, honey. I've called 911. You're going to be okay." I woke up in the emergency room, bright lights, machines beeping, a nurse leaning over me asking me questions. "What's your name? What year is it? Can you squeeze my hand?" My husband was there. I remember feeling relieved for a second, thinking he'd come for me. He still cared. Then I heard him talking to the doctor. She does this sometimes, gets dramatic, wants attention. Probably just got dizzy and made a big deal out of it. The doctor looked skeptical. "Sir, she's had a stroke. This isn't about attention. This is a medical emergency." My husband just shrugged, said, "Well, I'm here now. What do you need me to sign?" The 5 days in the hospital were a blur of tests and medications and physical therapy. They wanted to make sure I could walk, could use my left hand, could speak clearly. I improved quickly. The doctor said I was lucky. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt trapped. My husband visited twice a day, morning and evening. He'd sit in the corner on his phone, occasionally looking up to nod at a nurse or doctor. He brought his mother with him. She'd sit in the other chair and complain. The parking was terrible. The hospital coffee was awful. Her back hurt from the uncomfortable chair. Why was this taking so long? When could I go home? She never asked how I felt. Never asked if I needed anything. She just sat there, a physical representation of burden, as if my medical emergency was an inconvenience she had to endure. I tried to ask my husband about our children. Had he called them? Did they know I was in the hospital? He said he'd tell them when there was something to tell. Said they were busy with their lives, didn't need to worry about every little thing. Every little thing. I'd had a stroke, I could have died, and he called it a little thing. When I said I wanted to talk to my daughter, he said he'd see what he could do. But his tone made it clear he wouldn't do anything. He was keeping me isolated even here, even in a hospital bed, even when I was at my most vulnerable. But Mrs. Patterson from 4C, she knew my daughter's number. She'd gotten it years ago when we were friendly, before everything fell apart. She called her, told her I was alone, told her I'd been asking for them. When my daughter finally came, she walked into that hospital room and she saw me. Really saw me. I was frail, confused from the medication. My rust-colored cardigan draped over the chair because I'd asked for it, needing something familiar. She saw me in that bed, and then she saw him in the corner, and his mother complaining, and something in her face shifted. My daughter stood in the doorway for a long moment, just taking in the scene. I watched her eyes move from me to him to his mother and back to me. I saw her processing, calculating, trying to make sense of what she was seeing versus what she'd been told. Her father had said I was dramatic, attention-seeking, difficult, but the woman in the hospital bed looked small, scared, alone, and the man in the corner looked annoyed, inconvenienced, not worried, not scared, not devastated that his wife had nearly died, just annoyed. And his mother was complaining about parking. If you've ever seen someone wake up from a long sleep, that's what it looked like. Her eyes got wider. Her mouth opened slightly. She looked at me, then at him, then back at me. And I saw the moment the crack appeared in everything he'd built. She didn't say anything at first. She just pulled out her phone and started recording. Not to post, not to share, just to capture, to have proof of what she was seeing, what she was hearing. She needed evidence that this was real, that her memory wasn't playing tricks. She held that phone up and she was quiet, just watching, listening. A nurse came in to check my vitals, asked how I was feeling. I tried to answer, but my words came out slow, still affected by the stroke. The nurse was patient, kind. She adjusted my IV, asked if I needed anything for pain. Before I could answer, my husband spoke up from his corner. She says she needs pain medication every 5 minutes. She's fishing for narcotics. That's what she does. The nurse looked at him, then at me, confused. I said I didn't need pain medication. I hadn't asked for any. The nurse checked my chart, confirmed I'd refused pain medication twice already because I didn't want to feel foggy. Then, my husband launched into his speech. This is what she does. She creates drama, makes up stories, tells people things that aren't true to get attention. She's difficult to manage at home, refuses to take her medications properly. Probably why she ended up here in the first place. The nurse looked uncomfortable. My mother-in-law nodded along. She does refuse her medications. I've seen it. She forgets and then blames everyone else. The nurse glanced at my daughter, who was still recording, and I could see her choosing her words carefully. Well, we'll make sure she gets proper care while she's here. She left quickly, and I could tell she was uncomfortable with whatever dynamic she'd just witnessed, but didn't know how to address it. And through her phone, I heard myself through someone else's ears for the first time in years. I heard him tell the nurse I was difficult, that I refused to take my medication at home, that I made up stories for attention, that I'd probably faked the stroke for sympathy. I watched my daughter's face as she realized she'd heard these exact words before. About me, in different contexts, for years. I saw the moment she understood, the moment the pattern revealed itself, the moment she knew. My daughter's hand was shaking as she held her phone. She zoomed in on her grandmother, who was looking at her with this expectant expression, like she expected my daughter to agree, to validate the complaints. But my daughter didn't. She just kept recording. His mother said, "You see what we deal with? Your father and I have been trying to take care of her, but she makes it so difficult. She won't listen. She won't cooperate. We're doing our best, but she's resistant. As if I wasn't right there. As if I was a problem to manage. Not a person who just had a stroke." Then I saw myself through her eyes, and it broke me completely. I saw a woman who'd disappeared, who'd become so small and quiet and careful that she barely existed anymore. A woman who didn't defend herself because she'd learned defense was pointless, that no one would believe her anyway. A woman who'd accepted being erased because she thought that was what forgiveness looked like. I saw what my daughter saw, and I started to cry. Not the quiet tears I'd learned to cry silently in this apartment, but loud, body-shaking sobs that I couldn't control. Because for the first time in years, someone was seeing me, really seeing me, and she was horrified by what had been done. My daughter sat on the edge of my hospital bed and took my hand. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say, "I believe you." She just held my hand and kept recording, and when my husband told her to put the phone away, she said no. Just no. Simple as that. The first boundary, the first refusal to comply, the first crack in his control. He left the room. His mother followed him. And my daughter and I sat in that hospital room under fluorescent lights, and she said, "Tell me everything. Tell me the truth." And I did. I told her about the lies, about the isolation, about how every time I tried to reach out to her or her brother, he'd already been there, planting seeds, creating doubt. I told her about the Thanksgiving dinner where I'd cooked for days and everyone treated me like I was invisible. I told her about the gifts I'd sent that made her feel guilty because they didn't match the monster story she'd been told. I told her about her grandmother confirming lies, backing up false stories, helping to erase me. I told her about my sister who stopped believing me, about the church friends I'd pushed away because I couldn't bear their questions. I told her everything, and she listened, and she held my hand, and she cried too. She told me things I didn't know. How Dad had called her after every holiday to tell her I was upset she hadn't come to visit, even though I'd never been invited. How he'd showed her text messages supposedly from me saying cruel things about her kids, texts I'd never sent. How Grandma had told her I'd complained about being burdened by caring for her, which was the opposite of truth. How he'd created group chats without me, family plans without me, whole relationships without me, and then blamed me for being distant. She'd believed all of it, every word, and now she was seeing the architecture of the lie, the careful construction of my erasure, and she was devastated that she'd been part of it. The person who saved me, who gave me the framework to understand what had happened, was Pastor Renee from the church I'd stopped attending. My daughter called her from the hospital, and she came. She sat with me and held my hand and said the words I needed to hear. This is not forgiveness. This is abuse. Forgiveness does not require you to accept lies. Forgiveness does not mean staying in a situation that destroys you. Forgiveness does not mean letting someone rewrite your reality until you can't recognize yourself. She stayed with me through the discharge, helped me understand that what I'd been living through had a name, had a pattern, had nothing to do with my worth as a person or a mother. Pastor Renee had known something was wrong. She'd watched me disappear from church, watched me cancel plans, watched me shrink. She'd reached out a few times, left voicemails, sent cards, but she hadn't pushed because she didn't want to intrude. Now she wished she had. She wished she'd shown up at my door, insisted on talking, refused to let me isolate myself. But abuse works by making the victim complicit in their own isolation, she told me. You pulled away because that's what felt safest. Because facing the questions felt more painful than being alone, and he counted on that. He counted on your shame keeping you silent. She gave me language for what had happened. Gaslighting, triangulation, character assassination, parental alienation. These weren't just my failures or my imagination. These were techniques, tools of control used by people who need to dominate the narrative. She helped me see that my husband hadn't just lied. He'd systematically isolated me, turned my children against me, used his mother as a witness to legitimize his claims, and built a wall around me so high I couldn't see over it anymore. And she told me something I'll never forget. She said, "You are not crazy. You are being made to feel crazy. There's a difference." My fight back began with alliance, uniting with other victims in the family. My daughter started talking to her brother. Really talking. Not the surface conversations they'd been having, but deep, compare your notes kind of talking. She told him what she'd seen in the hospital. She showed him the videos she'd taken. She asked him to tell her every story Dad had told him about me, and she started comparing them to the stories Dad had told her. They didn't match. The timelines were wrong. The details contradicted. The woman he'd described to my son wasn't the same woman he'd described to my daughter, and neither of them was me. My son was harder to convince initially. He'd pulled away from me earlier than my daughter had, bought into the lies more completely. He'd heard years of Dad saying Mom's losing it, Mom's getting mean, Mom's not herself. He'd watched his grandmother nod along, confirm the stories, add details. He'd seen what he thought was evidence. Bank statements Dad showed him, text messages Dad claimed were from me, instances where I supposedly forgot important events or said hurtful things. He'd built a whole understanding of who I was based on information filtered through Dad. Breaking through that took time. But my daughter was persistent. She'd call him every day. She'd say, Remember when Dad told you Mom forgot your birthday? I was there. She didn't forget. She sent a card and called twice. Dad told her you were out of town. Remember when Dad said Mom called me a bad mother? I asked Mom about it. She cried. She'd never say that. She's proud of me. Remember when Dad showed you those bank withdrawals? Did you actually see Mom's signature? Did you verify they were real? And slowly, piece by piece, my son started to see the cracks too. They reached out to my sister, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. She had her own stories of his manipulation, moments where he'd called her to say he was worried about me, to plant seeds of doubt, to make sure even my own sibling questioned my stability. She told my daughter about phone calls where he'd sounded so concerned, so loving, so desperate for help managing my declining mental state. Calls where he'd asked her advice, asked if she thought I needed to be evaluated, asked if she'd noticed changes in me too. He'd used her concern for me as a weapon against me, turned her love into doubt. And she'd fallen for it because she trusted him. Because why would he lie about his wife's mental health? What would he gain? But now, looking back with clearer eyes, she could see it. The manipulation. The way he'd always called her after we'd had a good conversation to undermine it. The way he'd frame things as concern when it was actually accusation. The way he'd isolated me from her slowly, a little bit at a time, until we barely spoke anymore. She was furious, at him, but also at herself. She was my sister. She'd known me for 57 years. She should have trusted me over him. She should have questioned more. She should have shown up at my door and demanded the truth. Her guilt was almost as heavy as my hurt, and we spent hours on the phone crying together, rebuilding what had been broken. We built a timeline together, all of us. 30 years of lies. We documented everything we could remember, every contradiction, every moment where his story didn't hold up, every time he'd isolated me from someone who might have supported me. We became a united front, and for the first time in years, I wasn't alone. The confrontation happened through media, through public exposure. My daughter posted a video, not of me, but of herself. She sat in her kitchen and told the story of what her father had done, how he'd used her and her brother as weapons against their mother, how he'd convinced them their mother was unstable, dishonest, dangerous, how their grandmother had enabled every lie, had backed every claim, had helped erase me from my own family. She named the pattern. She called it parental alienation. She called it elder abuse. She apologized to me publicly, on camera, where everyone could see. If you need this story, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear this. The video went viral in our community. Thousands of people shared it. Hundreds of people reached out with their own stories. I wasn't alone. I'd never been alone. There were so many of us. So many mothers and fathers and grandparents who'd been systematically erased by someone they loved. The comments section became a place of witness, of validation, of collective rage at what had been done to us. People I hadn't spoken to in years called me, apologized, said they should have known, should have questioned, should have listened. The narrative my husband had built for 3 decades collapsed in 72 hours. The justice was external, familial, swift, and brutal. His own siblings, who had watched this for years, who had maybe suspected but never said anything, finally spoke up. They stopped inviting him to family events. They told him what he'd done was unforgivable. His mother, facing the shame of public exposure, was asked to leave the family group chat, asked to move out of our apartment, asked to understand that her choices had consequences. My children cut contact with both of them. Completely. No calls, no texts, no holidays, nothing. It wasn't what I wanted, not exactly. I never wanted my kids to lose their father. I never wanted his mother to die alone because despite everything, I'm still the woman who believes in compassion. But I also knew I couldn't keep sacrificing myself on the altar of family unity. I couldn't keep lighting myself on fire to keep them warm. Sometimes justice looks like boundaries. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like people finally facing the consequences of their choices. And sometimes, That's enough. My rebirth came through advocacy, through helping others in similar situations. Pastor Renee connected me with a community center that wanted someone to speak about elder abuse. I stood in front of 30 people and told my story, then 50, then 100. I started speaking at senior groups, at churches, at community meetings, anywhere that would listen. I talked about manipulator tactics, about knowing the techniques so you don't fall for them. I taught people the signs I'd missed for so long. Isolation is always the first step. Controlling the narrative is second. Using other family members as weapons is third. Making you doubt your own reality is the final stage. The first time I spoke publicly, I was terrified. My hands shook as I held the microphone. My voice wavered as I started to tell my story. But then I looked out at the audience, and I saw faces that understood. I saw people nodding. I saw tears. I saw recognition. After I finished, during the question and answer session, a woman in her 70s stood up. Her voice was shaking. She said, "You just described my life. I thought I was the only one. I thought I was going crazy. Thank you for telling me I'm not alone." She sat down and cried, and the woman next to her held her hand, and I realized this was bigger than me. This was about all of us. Another woman approached me after the talk. She was younger, maybe 40. She said her mother was going through this exact situation. Her father had turned her and her siblings against their mother for years. But recently, cracks had started to show, contradictions in his stories, moments where things didn't add up. She asked me how to help her mother, how to undo years of damage, how to rebuild trust. I gave her my phone number, told her to have her mother call me. That sometimes the best healing comes from talking to someone who's been there, who understands, who won't judge. She hugged me, thanked me, said I'd given her hope, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The work gave me purpose again. It gave me my voice back. Every time I spoke, I saw faces in the audience light up with recognition. I saw people cry because someone finally named what they'd been experiencing. I saw people take notes, ask questions, make plans to protect themselves or leave situations that were destroying them. I became someone again. Not the ghost I'd been in that apartment, but a full person with knowledge and power and something to offer the world. I wasn't just a victim of what had been done to me. I was a survivor with wisdom to share. I started a small support group that met weekly at the community center, just 6 people at first, all of them dealing with some form of family alienation or elder abuse. We'd sit in a circle and share our stories. No judgment, no advice unless asked, just witness, just validation, just proof that we weren't crazy, we weren't alone, we weren't making it up. The group grew, 10 people, then 15. Then we had to split into 2 groups to accommodate everyone. These people became my family. The family I'd chosen, built on truth instead of obligation. My liberation symbol was simple, almost embarrassingly so. I took a bus ticket to somewhere I chose myself. I rode that bus out of Cleveland to visit my sister downstate, and for the first time in decades, no one questioned where I was going. No one asked when I'd be back. No one told me I was being selfish or difficult or dramatic. I just bought a ticket and got on a bus and watched the city disappear behind me. That bus ride felt like flying, like the first breath after nearly drowning, like freedom tastes when you've forgotten the flavor. The bus was half empty. I sat by a window, my rust-colored cardigan wrapped around me, and I watched Ohio roll by. Bare trees against gray sky, snow-covered fields, small towns with their water towers and grain elevators. It was the middle of winter, everything dormant, waiting for spring. And I felt like I was waiting too. Not in the hopeless way I'd waited in my apartment, hoping my family would come back, but in an expectant way, knowing that something new was coming, something better, something I'd chosen for myself. When I got off that bus and saw my sister waiting for me, and she hugged me and whispered, I'm so sorry, I believed you. I believe you now. I cried. But they were different tears, relief, release, resurrection. Now I'm saving for my final destination, a country house with land and space to breathe. I dream about it every night. A place with a porch where I can sit in the morning with coffee and watch the sunrise without anyone telling me I'm wasting time. A place with a garden where I can grow vegetables and flowers and things that bloom. A place far enough from the city that I can't hear traffic, just birds and wind and quiet. Some days I imagine myself driving there in an Audi A8 in graphite gray. Something ridiculous and expensive and completely unnecessary. But in my fantasy, I deserve ridiculous things. I deserve expensive things. I deserve to take up space in the world again. The transformation wasn't instant. I still have bad days. Days where I wonder if I imagined some of it, if maybe I was partially to blame, if maybe I could have tried harder or been better or loved more. Those are the days Pastor Renee calls me, or my daughter stops by, and they remind me of the truth. They show me the timeline we built. They play me the recording from the hospital. They tell me stories I'd forgotten about times when I was strong and loving and completely sane. They rebuild my reality when it starts to crack. That's what real family does. They hold your truth when you're too tired to hold it yourself. My relationship with my children is healing, slowly. My son apologized through tears, said he'd been manipulated, said he should have questioned more. My daughter and I talk almost every day now. She tells me about her kids, asks my advice, includes me in her life. We're rebuilding trust brick by brick, conversation by conversation. Sometimes she asks me questions about the past, trying to separate what really happened from what her father told her happened. I answer honestly. I don't hide the hard parts or pretend I was perfect. I just tell her the truth, and the truth is enough. My son came to visit last month. First time he'd been to my apartment in 3 years. He stood in the doorway looking nervous, holding flowers, daisies. My favorite, which I was surprised he remembered. He said, "Can I come in?" And I said yes. And he came in, and we sat at my small kitchen table. And he cried. He said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have questioned more. I should have trusted you." I let him cry. I held his hand, and I told him, "You were manipulated by someone you trusted. That's not your fault. What matters is, you see it now. What matters is you're here." And we talked for hours, about his job, his life, his regrets, about my life now, my speaking work, my plans for the future, about how we move forward from here. He asked me if I could ever forgive him. And I told him the truth. I forgave you the moment you realized what had been done. You were a victim too. He's your father. You were supposed to be able to trust him. The person I'm still working on forgiving is myself. For staying so long. For accepting so much. For letting myself become so small. He shook his head. Said, "You survived. That's not nothing. That's everything." And maybe he's right. Maybe survival is enough. Maybe it's more than enough. Maybe it's everything. My husband and his mother live together now in a small apartment across town. I heard through my daughter that they barely speak to each other, that the alliance that destroyed me is now destroying them. I don't feel satisfaction exactly. Maybe I should. Maybe I'm supposed to feel vindicated or triumphant or glad they're suffering. But mostly I feel sad. Sad for the years wasted. Sad for the family that could have been. Sad for the man I married who became someone I don't recognize. Sad for his mother who chose cruelty over grace. Sad for all of us, really. Everyone lost something in this story. But here's what I gained. I gained myself back. I gained clarity. I gained the knowledge that I can survive betrayal, isolation, gaslighting, and systematic destruction and still come out whole on the other side. I gained a community of people who've lived through similar hells and emerged with wisdom and strength. I gained my children back, not the same way I had them before, but in a deeper, more honest way. I gained purpose through helping others. I gained freedom through telling my truth. What I need people to understand, what I say at every speaking engagement, is this. Global studies estimate that 142 million seniors suffer abuse worldwide. In Mexico, studies indicate that 1 in 3 seniors suffers some form of mistreatment. This is an epidemic hiding in plain sight. It's happening to your neighbor, your coworker, your friend's mother, your uncle. It's happening in nice neighborhoods and struggling ones. It's happening to educated people and those without resources. It's happening everywhere, all the time, because our culture tells us that family is sacred and forgiveness is mandatory, and speaking up is betrayal. Learn the manipulator tactics. Know that isolation is always the first step. If someone is systematically cutting you off from your support system, that's not protection. That's control. Know that gaslighting makes you doubt your own memory and perception, makes you feel crazy when you're actually seeing clearly. Know that triangulation uses other people to validate lies and make you feel outnumbered in your own truth. Know that character assassination destroys your reputation before you can defend yourself. Know these techniques exist. Know they're deliberate. Know they're not your fault. Know that family doesn't mean tolerating destruction. Blood relation doesn't give anyone the right to abuse you, manipulate you, or erase you. You can love someone and still leave. You can forgive someone and still protect yourself. You can honor your family and still set boundaries. These things are not contradictory. They're necessary. You deserve to exist fully in your own life. You deserve to be seen and heard and believed. You deserve safety, even from the people who raised you or married you or share your blood. Know that forgiveness doesn't require you to stay in the fire. Real forgiveness happens in your heart, in your healing, in your peace. It doesn't require relationship with the person who hurt you. It doesn't require giving them more chances to destroy you. It doesn't require pretending everything is fine. Forgiveness can look like distance. It can look like boundaries. It can look like never speaking to that person again. And that's okay. You're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to choose peace over family unity. And know that it's never too late to choose yourself. I was 59 when everything broke open. 59 when I finally saw clearly. 59 when I started rebuilding. You might be older or younger, but the principle is the same. You are not too old to start over. You are not too damaged to heal. You are not too far gone to find your way back to yourself. Every day you're alive is a chance to choose differently, to speak up, to leave, to tell your truth, to take that bus ticket to somewhere you choose yourself. I'm 60 now. A year has passed since the hospital, since the video, since the truth exploded into the open. I'm still in the same apartment with the fluorescent lights, but I'm saving for that country house. I'm still wearing my rust-colored cardigan, but now it feels like comfort instead of armor. I still say my morning prayer, but now I thank God for the truth instead of begging for a family that was destroying me. I'm playing dominoes with friends from church again. I'm eating pot roast on Sundays with my daughter and grandchildren. I'm living instead of surviving. My plastic pill organizer with the days of the week still sits on my nightstand. But now when I see it, I don't just think about getting through another day. I think about all the days ahead, all the mornings where I'll wake up free, all the choices I'll make that are mine alone, all the people I'll help through speaking my truth, all the space I'll take up in the world without apology. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Every day a gift I almost lost. Every day a chance to choose myself again. So I want to ask you something, wherever you're listening from. Are you seeing yourself in this story? Are you recognizing patterns in your own family, your own relationships? Are you the one being isolated, gaslit, erased? Or are you watching it happen to someone else and wondering if you should say something? Here's your sign. Say something. Believe them. Question the narrative. Look for the contradictions. Don't wait for a medical crisis to force the truth into the open. Don't wait until someone disappears completely before you notice they're being erased. And tell me, where are you listening from? What would you have done in my situation? Would you have left sooner? Would you have fought harder? Would you have seen the signs I missed? Leave a comment and let me know. Because your story matters too. Your perspective matters, your truth matters, and maybe someone reading your comment will find the courage to speak their own truth. Maybe someone will recognize their own situation in your words. Maybe together we can stop this epidemic of silence and shame. If this story resonated with you, if you needed to hear that you're not crazy, that you're not alone, that it's not too late, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs it. And subscribe for more stories of survival, resistance, and rebirth. Because there are so many of us. So many stories that need to be told. So many people who need to know that on the other side of betrayal is freedom. On the other side of silence is truth. On the other side of destruction is rebuilding, stronger and wiser than before. This is my truth. This is my story. This is what I survived. And if I can survive it, so can you.